In this video, I'll show you a dangerous attacking setup that can crush French defense players before they even finish development. One wrong move, and Black's position falls apart fast. After pawn to d4 and pawn to d5, you can immediately choose an aggressive plan with pawn to a5, entering the advance variation. This move grabs more space and restricts Black's flexibility right from the opening. Most of the time, Black strikes back with pawn to c5, aiming to challenge your center. But this is exactly the position we want to reach, because otherwise, Black often struggles to develop comfortably. Your space advantage makes knight to f6 difficult to arrange. If Black chooses knight to h6, that knight can later become vulnerable, damaging Black's pawn structure after exchanges. And if the knight develops to another square, it may interfere with the bishop's natural development, causing even more positional issues. Overall, the cramped position starts becoming unpleasant for Black. That is why Black usually tries to attack and remove your central pawns as quickly as possible. The standard reaction is pawn to c5. You answer with pawn to c3, supporting the pawn chain and keeping the center solid. Black develops with knight to c6, putting more pressure on d4, while you continue with knight to f3, strengthening the center once again. Now Black commonly plays queen to b6, increasing the attack on the d4 pawn. Here, you calmly develop with bishop to d3, preparing a famous tactical idea. An inexperienced opponent may greedily capture on d4 here, but this quickly turns into a serious mistake. After the exchanges on d4, you play bishop to b5 check. This move uncovers an attack on Black's queen, and on the following move, the queen is lost. The position becomes completely winning for White. Experienced players usually avoid falling for this. Instead, they respond with bishop to d7, blocking the check and removing future bishop to b5 check possibilities. Even then, sacrificing the pawn on d4 is often worth it for active piece play and attacking chances. Once Black captures on d4, you continue with knight to c3, entering a dynamic Gambit-style position. Now Black's queen becomes exposed in the center while you rapidly develop your pieces and prepare to castle. You gain a major lead in development, and the queen on d4 can easily turn into a target. One common continuation is queen to e5, where Black grabs another pawn. But then you play rook to e1, attacking the queen while lining up the rook against Black's king, creating dangerous tactical pressure. If Black retreats with queen to c7, it may appear safe, but it actually loses time. You can now capture the pawn on d5 because it is pinned, while also attacking the queen and gaining another tempo. If Black instead chooses queen to c6, you continue strongly with bishop to b5, increasing the pressure even further. And if Black gets greedy with queen takes d5, the game ends immediately because the pawn is pinned. You simply win the queen on the spot. Now what happens if the queen captures the bishop instead? Then comes a powerful tactical shot. Knight to c7, creating a devastating triple fork. On the next move, the queen falls and White wins decisively. There is also another dangerous line. After your rook attacks the queen, we already know queen to c7 is inaccurate because it gives White extra tempi and loses a pawn. So if Black understands this, they may try to stay active with queen to d4, centralizing the queen while still protecting the pawn on d5. But here comes the brilliant idea. Rook takes e6. It's a stunning exchange sacrifice, and if you ever manage to play this combination in a real game, it feels absolutely amazing. Now, regardless of how Black responds, they walk straight into a discovered check idea. If Black takes the rook with a bishop, you answer with bishop to b5 check. Once the king moves away, you simply collect the queen. If Black captures the rook using the pawn, then bishop to g6 check becomes the key move. After the king is forced to move, the queen is lost once again. So no matter which capture Black chooses, the outcome remains identical. White wins the queen. A more careful option for Black is queen to d6, protecting the d5 pawn while relocating the queen to a safer position. But even here, White continues playing with initiative and tempo. Since knight takes d5 no longer works immediately, you switch plans with knight to b5, attacking the queen while also eyeing the c7 square. From there, the knight threatens a fork on the king and rook. Black must now defend accurately. If Black decides to capture the knight, you recapture with check, forcing the king to move. As a result, Black loses castling rights, and the king remains vulnerable in the center. If the queen moves while maintaining protection, such as queen to b6, you continue smoothly with bishop to e3, developing another piece while attacking with tempo once again. This pattern keeps repeating throughout the line. Every move attacks the queen while improving your own position. Surprisingly, one of Black's most popular responses here is bishop to c5. It looks completely logical, developing a piece and shielding the queen at the same time. However, this turns out to be a serious mistake. You continue with bishop takes c5, followed by rook to c1, bringing another piece into the attack while hitting the queen again. The queen is forced to move once more, perhaps to a7 or another square. Then comes the tactical blow. Knight to c7, forking the king and rook. You win the rook and keep the attack going with a clearly dominant position. Now let's examine the toughest variation. If your opponent is well prepared, instead of greedily taking the pawn, they will often choose pawn to a6, a much more solid defensive setup. We have already seen in several lines that your knight or bishop can jump into that square and create dangerous threats, so black naturally tries to stop those ideas beforehand. So what should you do? Here, there is no need to sacrifice another pawn. You simply defend it with queen to e2. Black still needs to complete development, so knight to e7 is the usual continuation. Now you continue with king to h1, stepping out of the pin and preparing the possibility of pushing pawn to f4 later if necessary. Black develops further with knight to c6, attacking your pawn for a second time. Although moves like pawn to f4 can defend the center, I personally prefer faster development and attacking chances. In practical games, especially blitz, this setup becomes extremely uncomfortable for black. So instead, you continue with bishop to e3, choosing a highly aggressive setup inspired by the style of Mikhail Tal. The goal is to create a sharp, tactical, and exciting battle. After bishop to e3, you immediately attack the queen. Black will usually capture on e4, but you keep the initiative with pawn to f4, once again hitting the queen and gaining tempo. The queen retreats, and then you continue aggressively with pawn to f5. Your plan is very straightforward. Activate every piece and open lines toward the enemy king. Because of this, pushing the central pawn forward would usually be a mistake for black. They still need to finish development first. And by the way, pawn to d4 does not actually trap any of your pieces because you can always move with tempo. Moves like knight to e4 or bishop to f4 attack the queen immediately, so there is no real danger. After pawn to f5, black will most likely develop with bishop to b7, understanding they are behind in development and need to castle quickly. Now comes a very powerful move, rook to d1. This places your rook directly opposite the queen and creates several tactical threats. What makes this position especially interesting is that the move that looks safest for black is actually a huge blunder. That move is castling. The moment black castles, you strike instantly with pawn to f6. Suddenly your entire army is aimed at the king, and black's position becomes extremely dangerous. The idea behind pawn to f6 is simple. Destroy the pawn shield and rip open the king's defenses. If black responds with bishop takes f6, you continue fearlessly with rook takes f6, sacrificing even more material to open attacking lines. And if black captures with the pawn instead, you still keep sacrificing because your main objective is to expose the king completely. After the king captures, you launch queen to h5 check. The attack now plays itself. Every move comes with pressure and initiative. Where can the king escape? King to g7 is extremely dangerous because your queen and bishop already dominate that area. Moves like bishop to h6 would become crushing very quickly, so black usually tries king to g8 instead. Now comes a precise attacking move, knight to e4. This is not just development, it increases the pressure dramatically because the pawn is pinned by your rook and cannot defend properly. From e4, the knight attacks key squares while targeting the king, queen, and weak f6 pawn at the same time. Black's position is already collapsing. Even if black tries queen to a5 to defend, the attack keeps rolling. You continue with forcing moves like queen to g4 check, followed by queen to h4 check. The king is pushed around with no chance to regroup. Soon the pressure becomes too much. After a move like king to g8, your pieces are perfectly coordinated, and knight takes f6 check drags the king further into danger. After king to g7, the finish is beautiful. Queen to h6 checkmate. A clean and elegant attack from start to finish.